Let's move on to our next segment. Brandon Wiseman of TruckSafe is joining us now. We're going to talk a little bit about the clearinghouse. And Brandon, you put up a video not too long ago about the clearinghouse and how it works. Just wanted to get your take, and as we work into talking about it in terms of, is it doing what it's supposed to be doing, and could it be doing any things better? But let's start out with the very beginning of things. Why was this started, and now is it functioning as designed?
Yeah, hey guys, it's hard for me to concentrate with those McDonald's fries background there. But yeah, so the clearinghouse has been in effect now for about 4 years. It'll have its 4-year anniversary in January of 2024. It was set up as a central repository for all drug and alcohol testing violation data for CDL drivers in the United States, as a resource for prospective employers of those drivers to be able to check and make sure that the drivers haven't incurred a violation that renders them disqualified from operating a commercial motor vehicle for them. Historically, that process was pretty manual. Those prospective motor carriers would have to reach out to previous employers of those drivers and ask those questions. So the clearinghouse is nice in that it centralizes all of that information and leaves only one place for those prospective employers to go to check out that information.
And Brandon, when you're looking at the inception of the clearinghouse, did it include people or drivers that may have had offenses or infractions after its creation, or did it really grandfather in all types of offenses that were maybe within a 10 or 15-year span before?
No, so when it was set up in early January of 2020, it only includes violation data as of that date going forward. So there's no historical data going back beyond January of 2020.
So looking at it, obviously, one of the things that has changed, of course, over time in the drug and alcohol space is, of course, states' attitudes about marijuana. How is the clearinghouse handling that in terms of what is legal in one state is illegal in another?
Yeah, so even broader than the clearinghouse, the DOT has been very clear on this issue, on the legalization of marijuana in various states. DOT doesn't care if it's legal in your particular state. If you are an interstate regulated driver, it is unlawful for you to use marijuana as a commercial driver. And if you test positive, regardless of whether it was legal in your state, you are going to be prohibited from operating a commercial motor vehicle unless and until you go through the return to duty process. If we look at the clearinghouse data, marijuana violations are far and away the most common within that are reported to the clearinghouse. Looking at the numbers here, in 2020, the first year that the clearinghouse was set up, there were 29,500 marijuana violations reported to the clearinghouse. Last year, that rose to 40,916 violations. So these are pretty common violations that are reported to the clearinghouse. So big issue for sure in the industry.
And Brandon, we're looking at marijuana. Is there any distinction between alternatives that you might find in a convenience store, or is it really just all types of marijuana that's just going to be captured by this test?
Yeah, the bad thing is that, particularly with CBD use becoming more and more common across the United States, the problem with CBD, it's a close relative to marijuana, although CBD can range in terms of its quantity of THC, which is the psychoactive compound of marijuana that gives the high effect. CBD, a lot of manufacturers represent on their packaging that it contains little to no THC. The idea being that those representations are supposed to give comfort to the users that they won't test positive for marijuana on a drug test. But the problem is nobody regulates those representations on the sides of those packages. The FDA has not yet stepped in and come down on any of these manufacturers of CBD products. So what we found is that a lot of those representations are false, and the product does contain THC, and then we're seeing a lot of truck drivers taking CBD thinking that it contains little to no THC, and then they test positive for a drug test. And then to add to the problem, the DOT has come out with guidance that's available on their website that says, if that happens to you as a truck driver, we don't care. We don't care what the reason is for a positive marijuana test. If it happens to be that you are using CBD, it doesn't matter. It's still going to be a positive marijuana test, and you're still going to be prohibited from operating a commercial motor vehicle. So very risky at this point in time for truck drivers to be using marijuana alternatives, including CBD.
Is that the reason for the increase, or it can't be singularly the reason for the increase in the fact that there's basically misinformation there about CBD in terms of taking that, but also the increase also doesn't seem to show that this is a deterrent at all.
No, not at all. Well, that could be a reason for a slight increase. I suspect that the reason for the increase is that more and more motor carriers are using the system. We're 4 years out now, and I still find a lot of motor carriers don't even know what the clearinghouse is, and they aren't using it. That was one of the reasons I wanted to publish that video that we did this week, is to make sure that all regulated motor carriers that employ CDL drivers know that they need to be using the system. So as more and more motor carriers begin to learn about this, and as we have more new motor carriers added to or registering for a DOT number, we're going to continue to see increases in these numbers unless and until marijuana becomes legal at the federal level. But of course, marijuana is not the only drug that we're testing drivers for.
Sure.
We're testing it's a 5-panel test, so we're also looking for cocaine, methamphetamine, those types of things. So.
And Brandon, when you're testing for some of those drugs or all the drugs, are there any breakouts in some of the data or findings when you're looking at the results of age groups that are typically higher for these tests or positives?
Yeah, the clearinghouse data doesn't break it out into age groups. It would be interesting to see that, but no, they don't break it out that way. They do have quite a bit of data available, though. Anybody can access this. If you go to FMCSA's clearinghouse, just Google it, you'll find it, and then they publish monthly reports. They had been doing a good job of updating the records every month. They're a little bit behind now. The latest data that's on the website is from August of this year, but one of the most interesting pieces of data that I always take away from the report is how many current drivers are in so-called prohibited status, meaning they have tested positive or they have otherwise violated the drug and alcohol testing rules, and they are now not able to operate a commercial motor vehicle. If you look at the data from August, as of August of 2023, there are 146,216 CDL drivers currently in prohibited status, meaning unable to operate commercial vehicles because of a prior violation. So that number is continuing to tick up month over month, and it's becoming a big issue for a lot of motor carriers.
Yeah, absolutely. When numbers tick up that high there as well. Brandon, in terms of using the system, for instance, in civic courses, say, for instance, teachers, they are mandated reporters in terms of things like, say, for instance, child abuse, things like that. Are carriers mandated reporters if they find out that one of their drivers has had a positive test?
Yeah. So the clearinghouse works essentially through two functions. There's the reporting function, and then there's the querying function. Who is it that reports violation data to the clearinghouse? There are a few different stakeholders to the system that have reporting obligations. They're going to be primarily the medical review officers that verify the results of the positive test results. If we're talking about a positive drug test result, those are going to be reported by those medical review officers. They're the ones that verify the positive, and then they have the obligation to report them. Employers, motor carriers, do have certain reporting obligations, but not for the positive test, drug test. For example, motor carriers have an obligation to report certain refusals. If they tell a driver, hey, you've been selected for a random test, and then that driver just does not proceed to the testing site, that would be considered a refusal under the federal drug and alcohol testing rules. And since the MRO is not involved at that point, somebody has to report that to the clearinghouse. And so it's the motor carrier in that situation that has the reporting obligation. So there are several different things that get reported to the clearinghouse, and each of them are reported by a specific stakeholder.
Brandon, thanks so much for joining us this morning and shedding some light on this topic. For those that want more of your content or maybe get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Trucksafe.com is the best place to get it. And then also you can follow us on social media, including LinkedIn. We're constantly posting all kinds of fun DOT compliance stuff.
Check out that video there as well on the Clearinghouse. Brandon, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.